I did fix my console, so I just had to wrap these just to check some of the double equals, triple equals. I just wrapped them in a quick if statement. We'll use console.log quite a bit as we're building our node apps because it will let us output stuff to the console. So if I run this way, I'm not going to do them all, but just checking, for example, the first one, 0 and false. So if I run this, I'm just going to ignore the warning down here. So that evaluates the true with a double equals that says those values are equivalent. But if I try and run this same code with a triple equals, clear my console and run it again, that triple equals, we can see the difference. Right? So the triple equals adds the data type check, the type checking, whereas the double equals doesn't. Couple of other resources I just want to point out. I threw this one up. This is a place you can look for some additional Node tutorials. It's nodeschool.io. So they have a bunch of tutorials here that you can do with getting started with Node. So they recommend any text editor. They've got a basic JavaScript, how to use Git within Node, a bunch of other things. They've got some JavaScript basics. They're talking about ES5, ES6 is now out, coming out. So I've put the link to this inside of the nodeschool.io. Code School also, if you want to do some more JavaScript, to get more comfortable with JavaScript, they have some free online JavaScript courses that you can do. So they have 4 courses, but the first one is free. So you can do that course. It's got 3 levels, so it's 6 total videos and 27 total JavaScript challenges. So this is, again, not particular to Node, just JavaScript in general. So lots of free resources online for you guys. Okay, so the links are here under in the Tools and Resources folder. So I just want to go through a few other features of JavaScript, then we'll start playing around. So operators, so we have the typical operators again we see in Java. So we've got exclamation mark for not, and we've got the and and the or. This is all familiar to you guys already. And again, we can use parentheses if we need to check a series of conditions. Parentheses will do it. Our if statements are the same, you know, conditions in round brackets and commands inside of curly braces with if, else. We have the switch statement as well when we're evaluating a whole, you know, one variable for a series of possible values. You can use a whole long series of ifs and else ifs, or we could use a switch statement, which is probably more efficient. Same kind of loop, so we've got both a while loop, while a condition is true, we can execute, or we can have a do while. We don't tend to use these very much. And we also have the same kind of for loop in Java, right? Initialize a variable, usually starting at 0, figure out when we're going to stop, and then how are we going to increment. Typically with plus plus, so we're incrementing one at a time. So we'll maybe play around with these a little bit today. So I want to talk a bit about objects, functions, and events. So we've got, for example, if we have a date object, there are some built-in JavaScript functions. So for example, converting to a string or parsing the date. We want to, for example, get the month. So these are some built-in JavaScript methods. Same with some built-in methods of strings. So we've got methods like index of substring to lowercase to uppercase. Similar types of functions for doing manipulations. We've got a dot, we've got a dot length property. We want to evaluate the length of a string. So just a few examples of the kinds of things we can do with them here. So functions in Java, we write our own functions. Same in Node, so they're preceded with function. Obviously, our parameters are listed in brackets. The parameters are not typed. So just like our variables aren't typed in JavaScript, our function parameters aren't typed as well. Okay. There's some new syntax with JavaScript 2015 or ES6 around some other flexibility. So one of the new things which JavaScript, believe it or not, has never supported until the new version, until ES6, it never supported default values for parameters. So if a function took parameters, you actually couldn't define, you know, if somebody wanted to pass in, we had 2 parameters, we only wanted to pass in 1, and we wanted our function to say if we don't get a second value, we want to default it. JavaScript never actually supported that until this year. So that's a new feature in ES6. We do have the return statement, and we can also set a variable equal to a function name. We're going to do this a lot in Node, use this type of syntax. So basically an anonymous function. When it's assigned, the result of that function is assigned to a variable. So we'll use this structure quite a bit. Have you guys used this structure before at all in Java? With anonymous functions?
There's no
No.
anonymous.
Or in PHP? Okay. All right. So a simple example would be this, right? So we want a variable called showYear. So we can code this all as one command. We call the function, and that function then assigns that alert to our showYear variable. Going to ignore the stuff. I try to take out everything related to the DOM. The DOM is all client-side JavaScript, which is really something we're not. You know, the syntax is the same. We're really not concerned with DOM objects in this course. We're concerned with using JavaScript primarily on the back end on the server. So here would be, for example, an anonymous function with 2 parameters. So we have a function that takes both a subtotal and a tax rate. It's going to calculate out the amount of tax and return that into our calculate tax variable. Okay? If you don't like this syntax, that's fine. You don't have to use it, but you're going to see it a lot when we're coding Node applications. So we're probably going to use this syntax most of the time. Or again, here's one. No parameters. It doesn't return a value in this case. So those are just some samples.
Well, I don't understand why we would even use that syntax. Why would you not just name the function? Like, what's the difference? It's almost as if you're making this anonymous function, you're initializing with a variable or whatever. Why don't you just name the function and call the function by its name? I don't understand what the difference is, or why it's necessary. Do you know, or is it just?
Well, one of the benefits of doing this in Node is this can run, when we use this way, it can run asynchronously. So we can do this, and then we can do something else. So that can run as a call. That has our asynchronous callback structure. We looked at callbacks and asynchronous code last week. So that would be non-blocking in this case, right? If that function's complicated and going to take a while to run, we can do other things, and this function will complete and populate our variable when it's done. That's one of the benefits. So we have both global and local. Okay, so normally we use this var keyword when we declare our variables. So any variable by default you created outside of a function, it's global. So it's global in that file. It can be seen anywhere in that file. Obviously, you create a variable inside a function. It's only usable inside. Now, one of the new things that has come out in ES6 is we also have not only the var keyword for declaring a variable, there's also a new keyword called let. Whereas basically, I didn't have time to put together a simple example. It basically lets us use a variable as both global and local when we make it let. I'll try to come up with it. I have an example for next week I'll throw together about that. So generally when we want to pass local variables, generally we want to use local variables where we can and pass those as arguments in our functions. We'll use some global variables, but it just makes debugging. Global variables make tracing and debugging a little more difficult than using local variables and function parameters. So it's kind of good practice for us to use local variables when we can. And arrays, we may have a chance to play around with these again. These are going to be the same kinds of rules as with Java. Okay, so we can have multi-dimensional arrays. Arrays always are going to start with 0. And our syntax for creating an array would just look something like this. So we're going to create a variable equal to a new array, or if our array is going to be empty, we don't know. So this is when we know how many elements we're going to have. By default, we've got a provinces array. We can pretty much hard code that with the 10 provinces. That's going to be, we know how many items are going to be in there. If it's going to be a dynamic array, we're just going to initialize it with square brackets, and we'll dynamically add elements to that array. So this would be the same in Java. So we've got properties. We've got a length property that'll tell us how many items. So these kinds of functions would be similar. So find the number. We can set a value, particular item in the array, or we could delete a value at a particular index. We may have a chance. So using for loops again would be similar in Java. So we're using ++ for counting, and we can iterate through a collection and just supply an index dynamically in a loop. We're going to do this a fair bit, iterating through a collection. I think a few of these examples still have alert in it, so that's really client-side JavaScript. Obviously on the server, we're going to use console log to output those. A few other basic elements like push, shift, join, convert to string. So again, similar kind of functions borrowed from Java for manipulating arrays. Okay, so some sample code here of how we would use some of those functions. So what I want to do is give you guys a little bit of a chance to play around with JavaScript a bit. I will just point out this function because we do use it. I haven't coded in Java in a long time, so I can't even remember. Does Java have the set interval and clear interval functions? I'm not sure if these are particular to JavaScript, whether Java even has these, or if you've ever used them. Never seen them? Okay, so this may be particular. So it basically creates a timer. So we want to run a function repeatedly. We want to run, we want to check for a file. Say every 10 seconds, we can use set interval to call some function and run it in milliseconds at particular intervals, or a clear interval to stop it. So we want to do something like build a slideshow in JavaScript, right? We want to load an image. We want to have that image display, but then every 5 seconds, we want to load another image. We can use set interval for doing things on a particular schedule or time. Yeah, basically is what it will do. Okay, so very useful function which we'll use. So I just want to enable a little exercise for you guys. So if on Blackboard, you can go into week 2. So in week 2, there's a little exercise from Code Academy's JavaScript. They've got a really good set of JavaScript exercises and things online. So I want you guys to try one, which is this. So if you click on the link. So you can do this all online. Basically, there's 9 steps. It's creating a rock, paper, scissors game using JavaScript. So this is what you get. It has 1 of 9. So they've basically started. Some of the screens are blank, and on some of them they give you some code to start, and they want you to work with it. Let me just make sure. So if you can grab that link. So I think you should get a blank code editor. So your instructions are on the left. They've described what in each step, there's 9 steps. They've described the application. And you sometimes have to scroll down to see all the instructions. So basically you type your code here. When you think your code is right, you click on Save and Submit Code, and it will evaluate your code. So if I type, you know, bar_x and submit, well, it just says, well, it says click Save and Submit when you're ready to start. So in step 1, you don't have to type any code. So it prompts you walking through the creation of a simple JavaScript game. So I want you to give this a try. If you have a question, you're stuck at any point, I'm not marking you on this, but this is a chance for you to go ahead and try it. Okay, so I'm just going to walk around. You can work with someone else, but I suggest you try and do this on your own and create the basic game. So the end product, if I run it in JS bin, I think should be something like this.